My name is Melinda Bachini. I'm the Director of Advocacy with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, and I'm also a 12-year survivor of stage 4 cholangiocarcinoma. Fortunately, miraculously, I stumbled upon a clinical trial on my own. I'd kind of stopped looking for clinical trials because at that time, 12 years ago, there was not a lot of clinical trials available for cholangiocarcinoma patients. But I happened to stumble upon the clinical trial out at the National Institute of Health. And I remember reading about it and understanding that it was a type of immunotherapy, and it had an initial chemo regimen, but only for a week. And then after that, it was your immune system doing the work. And I remember looking at my husband and saying, I want to give this a try. And so we took it to our local oncologist, and he said he would be happy to support us in whatever we wanted to do. But typically they work with the University of Denver because that's what we're locally close to. And I said, no, this is something I want to do. So we ended up making the phone calls. We ended up doing the paperwork. We ended up facilitating getting enrolled into this clinical trial out at the National Cancer Institute. We flew out there to Bethesda, Maryland from Billings, Montana, had our initial interview, and was accepted into this clinical trial. I remember going through the consent form, and the first, it was one of the doctors, the fellows, was, trying to explain this consent form to me, which was, a little overwhelming. It was a lot of information, but the thing I remember the most is that she ended several sentences with, "and you could die." And I'm like, is she trying to talk me out of this? I looked at my husband and wondered that. But after another physician came in and explained, and she was more upbeat and her approach was different, it made all the difference in the world. And, realistically, when we read it and put the numbers into percentages, it wasn't as scary as it at first sounded like. But on the other hand, I also knew that I had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. So I entered into this trial with that thought. At that time, it was called the GI tumor infiltrating lymphocyte trial, GI TIL trial. And we entered in March of 2012, and we're accepted with that initial interview. And 2 weeks later, we went out for our first lung surgery. And I say our because this is a family affair. My husband and I went out together. And so we were gone again from Billings to Bethesda for about a week while they removed 2 to 4 tumors from my lungs and pulled those T cells at the tumor out to grow into the lab. Or grow in the lab to be able to put back into me. I went home again, and then a month later, I was back out there to receive these cells. And it was a month in the hospital, so it wasn't an easy treatment. And it was difficult because I was away from my children for a month. The first week, we received the chemo-depleting or immunodepleting chemo regimen, which wipes out your immune system to be ready to receive these new cells. And the second week, I received 42.6 billion cells and a drug called IL-2 that can have some nasty side effects. And then the third and fourth week is recovering my immune system enough to be able to go home again. The results of the first treatment were pretty spectacular. I was the 9th person to enter into this trial, but the first with cholangiocarcinoma and the first to have a response. I had an overall shrinkage of almost 30%, and I had no further treatment for 18 months. I enjoyed a great quality of life. It was pretty miraculous. During that 18-month time frame, for the first 6 months, my tumors were shrinking, and then the next 6 months they were stable. In the last 6 months, they started to grow again. But it was during that 18-month time frame that the research scientists were studying my T cells and discovered that some of my T cells were reactive to one of my mutations, and they wanted me to come back and be retreated with this T cell treatment. So I went back for round 2, 18 months later in September of 2013. Again, had to go for surgery to have more tumors removed from my lungs, and back after that for a month in the hospital for my second T cell infusion. The second time around, I received 3 times as many cells, like 126 billion cells, but 95% of that population was that specific mutation reactive T cell targeting one of the mutations in my cancer. The team was really excited about it, which made me excited, and rightfully so. I had some tremendous results. This scan shows some of the tumors that were in my lungs, the size of them, and what they shrunk to about 6 months after my second T-cell infusion. It was pretty miraculous. And again, my quality of life was so much better. So at that time, I had an overall shrinkage of about 50 to 60%, 3 years of a great quality of life, no other treatments, just my immune system keeping the cancer at bay. They published the study, the data of the study on my T cells in the Science Journal. And because of that, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and other Associated Press wanted to do a story. And so they interviewed me and my family, and the stories went worldwide in a matter of days. And in that first week, I received hundreds of phone calls from patients all over the world just wanting hope. They just wanted to know that there was a possibility that something like this could possibly work for them. They didn't need to know that this would work specifically for them. They just needed to know that there was a possibility and some hope. And that was really when my true love for patient advocacy was born. And that's when I knew that I really wanted to do something with this miraculous response I received from such wonderful science to be able to pay it forward. But yes, 3 years later, after my second T-cell infusion, is when we saw another sign of growth in my tumors. We chose to be proactive and have some of the remaining tumors in my right lung removed with a thoracotomy. Again, back for another surgery on my lungs. And the results of that research showed that the mutation-reactive T cells were still present in my system, which was good. The same mutation was also present, but this time the tumors were infiltrated with macrophages that expressed high levels of PD-L1. And so they chose to treat me with pembrolizumab to try to open that window for my immune system to recognize the cancer again. And I received a total of only 8 doses. After the first 2 doses, they did scans, and there was tremendous shrinkage again of what was left of my tumors. Technically, in March of this year, 2022, it'll be 5 years that I've had any other treatments. And while I am not considered no evidence of disease or in remission, even though I like to think that, there's a couple spots in my left lung that we keep an eye on, but in the last 5 years, they haven't grown, and we're hoping it's just scar tissue. Again, because of the incredible response that I had, I really wanted to find a way to pay it forward with advocacy. I started volunteering with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation about 10 years ago or so. And fortunately, 4.5 years ago, came on as a full-time employee. Prior to my cancer diagnosis, I was a paramedic and I loved that job. And I never thought I would be able to find something I loved as much as that. And I'm happy to say that I did. I also serve as a patient advocate for the NCI Hepatobiliary Task Force, for the ECOG Akron GI Advocacy Group, and for the NCI Council of Research Advocates. I serve as a patient advocate on the NCCN Hepatobiliary Guidelines Panel. I do whatever I can to bring the patient voice to the table, especially for those patients with a rare form of cancer, such as cholangiocarcinoma. I also do my best to advocate for clinical research, clinical trial funding for NCI, in any opportunity that I can get, because I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had the opportunity to enter into the clinical trial out at the National Cancer Institute. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about clinical trials and the importance and the barriers that some of us patients face with access to clinical trials. Patients need access. We need access to experts in our cancer. We need access to biomarker testing, which can open up possibilities to enter into clinical trials. We need access to clinical trials. In Billings, Montana, there were none available for cholangiocarcinoma, and I was going to have to go wherever I could to find one. And we need access to the most available treatment, the most successful treatment, the most up-to-date treatment in our cancer types. One thing that we've done is we've created a video at the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation called Biomarkers Matter. We have a cholangiocarcinoma specific version, but we also have a tumor agnostic version and a provider version. We want to help increase biomarker testing and also help increase clinical trial enrollment. So I invite you to share this with your patients, with your foundations, with anyone you would like to. We want it to be shared widely to be able to help as many patients as possible.